What's up, everybody? This is Dan. I'm here with John today.
What's up?
We're going to be talking about Project Serpo and Project Crystal Knight, which was pretty much the journey to Serpo. So, we'll start it off with a little quote. It was the darndest thing I've ever seen. It was big, it was very bright, it changed colors, and it was about the size of the moon. We watched it for 10 minutes, but none of us could figure out what it was. One thing's for sure, I'll never make fun of people who say they've seen unidentified flying objects in the sky. President Jimmy Carter, 1969. So, we're going to be talking about Project Serpo today and all of its entails. We'll start off with a little bit of history, what it was, and go into what happened. We got the commander's log, got a few things. So, if you haven't watched Close Encounters of the Third Kind, it is directly related to Project Serpo, and supposedly it is very factual. All the factual events that took place in that movie, that was based on fact, supposedly. Um, Steven Spielberg likes to call it science fact.
So essentially, it's inspired by
Right.
the events of Project Serpo, whatever, from
Yeah.
what was known at the time.
Right. So, we'll go back to Truman era. So we'll start off with Truman creates CIA. Truman creates Majestic 12, because Majestic 12 who has control over this project. So basically, that happens. And we can even go into some Roswell stuff, because technically it all happened after this. So Roswell, you get the crash. There's two crashes. One alien survives. He makes contact with his home world eventually, because the device was broken. They eventually got it working.
Which was the Roswell crash was the one that actually had the alien supposedly that was alive. And
Yep.
the other crash was the one that's not really reported on very much, but they don't have any. There was no survivors at that one,
Right.
and that one was supposedly not found till way later, right?
Yeah, it was years later.
Because it was like buried in the mountains or something like that in a place where probably just was no path of least resistance out there for people walking around or hunting or anything. So
Yeah, they said they found there was 4 alien bodies, I want to say, and they were very decomposed.
yeah, yeah.
So they take this alien, they refer to him as EBEN 1. So Eben is what I call it. I don't know if that's what everybody calls it or not. But so Eben 1, they have him, makes contact with his homeworld eventually. These guys are pretty smart. He was able to pick up some broken English and actually communicate. It said that they all have at least 160 IQ. That's on average. So, picks up some broken language, sends some messages back to his homeworld.
Which was 5 messages, I believe, in total, is what it was. But these were over the course of a couple of years, right? Like before he died, because he sent the 5th message, I believe, right before the alien died, because it's supposedly like the alien did die after a couple of years because they didn't have the technology, or we didn't have the biotechnology in order to keep him alive.
Yeah.
So, and I guess like the first couple messages too, it's important to note that supposedly it was when he was sending these messages, they weren't like interstellar messages. They were to like a mother craft that was somewhere close, which why did they just come pick the damn dude up?
Right.
You know what I
that's
mean?
actually speculated. Like, why didn't they do that?
It's like a pretty shitty captain to like leave an alien behind.
Right. Right. And it wouldn't have taken the they didn't actually pick up Americans for Serpo for a while back or a while forward either. No, that could have came down long ago.
Well, the alien. What is it like? The 4th or the 5th message was
the 5th one was the exchange program.
The exchange program idea, concept, or whatever. Yeah. So like enact the exchange program.
And it was never really answered.
Yeah, but then eventually they came back, and then supposedly,
basically after that 5th message, the alien eventually died, and then we were able to communicate with them. At first, we tried their language, which is like musical tones. So we tried their language, and we weren't getting great results because on their reply, we could only like pick up like 30% of the message for us to like understand it. So then we sent them English, and then we got broken English in return. They didn't use verbs; they just used nouns and stuff like that. They didn't understand the concept of a verb, so we couldn't really communicate that well. But then we sent them like an alphabet chart and how our language works on different sheets, is what they said. So the aliens got a little bit better at communicating, and were able to communicate with us in English. Is how this
just a side note as we're going through this shit is so nuanced. Like, it's so funny. Like, if you like really look at the story and like how fucking detailed everything is. Dude, with very. Like shit, like, you know what I mean? No verbs, only nouns that they used and stuff like that. So I mean, you know, a lot of this stuff obviously is extremely out there and far fetched. You know what I mean? And its possibilities, but at the same time, like, you know, if this is one giant conspiracy and a bunch of bullshit, I mean, it's a very detailed story.
It is.
You know what I mean? This is on the level of like creating like a fucking Magic the Gathering world or some shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, with all the different cards and numbers and everything else and intricacies and shit like that of like something like that. You know, that's how detailed and crazy the story is in terms of like the little, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, even looking at like Serpo.org right now, just looking at some of the math equations for G-force and antimatter and all this other shit that they've, you know what I mean? Like, that they have on here and stuff. I mean, it's wild shit. You know what I mean? So very detailed. So as we're going through it, there's a we may have this dumbed down in terms of how we're presenting or talking about it, but when you actually go on here and look at the actual you know, data, what have you, I mean, it's how much information.
We are not scientists.
No, I am. No,
we're just giving
I couldn't call bullshit on you if I wanted to when it comes to some of these math equations and stuff. You know what I mean? So
all we're doing is here is giving you the information as we interpret it, and then our thoughts on it.
Yeah.
So
that's. I mean, so. Anyways.
I'm not going to dispute your math equations. It's not happening.
Yeah, you can run circles around me all day with that shit. All right,
so basically, yeah, we get our messages and we're going back and forth with them. They ended up letting us know that they were going to meet us on such and such date, and we sent coordinates. I guess they ended up flying to the wrong coordinates, but it all got fixed anyway. And when they land, they're supposed to pick up 12 Americans with them and take them back. Well, they landed, they got their dead bodies from their people, and they left. That was it. They just left. They ended up coming back on a later day and obviously picking them up. But so before that, we get Kennedy in office, and Kennedy creates the DIA, and
which is, what's that stand for?
Defense Intelligence Agency, I believe.
Okay. Yep.
So he creates that. Basically, this was because information was being hidden from him, from the Majestic 12, and the CIA were keeping information from Kennedy. Kennedy wanted to create his own intelligence agency, so that he could basically rival it and get that information because he wanted that info. So basically, he ends up eventually getting it. They keep him in the dark about some things. They keep him in the dark about what they know about the EBENs.
Which just the reason why was because they were worried that he was gonna his intentions were to reveal everything to the public.
Yes, he wanted to disclose it all.
He did not want to keep it secret and to a secret of Cabal or whatever was the potential, you know what I mean, the theory behind why they kept Kennedy out of it.
Yes, which is why we have the information we have today, technically. DIA was created in order to disclose this information, so 25 years after this happened, technically it did disclose from an anonymous source that was with the DIA. And, I mean, anonymous makes it a little bit harder to believe. So
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff. I mean, obviously, it's it's gonna be very difficult to try to verify based off of like
yes.
even if we knew the person's name, like what's his name, Bob. You know what I mean? It's
Well, if
still
we could verify his story and see how high up was at the DIA and et cetera,
okay. Well,
then
yeah, I guess on that aspect, you're right. Yeah, I mean that's a good point. Um,
I mean it'd give
verifying,
more credibility because technically
yeah,
I can be anonymous. So
yeah, exactly.
and I can make
Yeah.
up some good ass stories. So we get Kennedy. As I said, he wasn't told everything, so he didn't know that the EBENs were friendly. The whole reason he was on board and was good with this was because he wanted to see what kind of technology they were working with, military reasons, etc. So he thought maybe this is an actual threat. We should probably send these 12 people just to see what they're capable of. He didn't know what the Majestic 12 knew, which was they were actually friendly,
Yeah.
very friendly. They were sharing information with us already. They were good. So he basically Kennedy never actually got to see them depart. He was assassinated prior to that because they thought he was going to come out with it prior to it ever taking off.
So just a side note to put in perspective for people to give you a better visual. Number one, the Majestic 12. When we say the Majestic 12, we're talking about the people that were in charge of this program that were appointed
MJ-12, yes.
by, I believe it was it Eisenhower?
I think it was Truman.
Truman. Sorry. So it was Truman. They were appointed by Truman, and Majestic is referring to the level of secrecy. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So like top secret clearance. This is Majestic level. You know what I mean? So that's supposed to be like above a top secret clearance. And for the visual, think of like the first Independence Day. When the president walks in and they seeing these aliens and this fucking alien spacecraft, and we've had this stuff since Roswell, blah blah blah. And the president's like, why in the hell was I not briefed on it? And
Right.
I can't remember the term for it, but basically the term was, basically, the scientist basically says to him that, you're going to be in and out of office, so like you can't know about this, then leave office, essentially. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
See, that part of it I can see is totally believable too. The president's not giving all this
Plausible
information.
deniability is what
Right.
it's called. I believe is what it's called.
We know
So-
you're a short-term member of
Yes.
this office,
So you're
we have
not.
this hole in
part of
place,
this.
and there always know.
Yeah, and so that what's referred to is it's like a cabal, essentially, of, an NGO, if you will, that's attached very deeply ingrained in the government that has kind of autonomy to do what it wants. Now, in terms of funding and all that kind of stuff for something like that to really exist, I'm not really sure what you would have to do. I know that when you look at like special operations units like Delta Force and stuff, they have their own direct feeds from the Department of Defense that comes from Congress. That's like one person in Congress knows what they spend their money on and shit like that from an audited perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd have to be something set up like that, but it's not exactly something I don't think you'd be kept completely secret if you follow the money. You know what I mean? Something like that would
Right.
take some serious amount of money. So the cover story would have to be pretty good. It would have to be something similar to like, some kind of weird random unit in the military or something like that, like the 33rd, whatever brigade or something like that out of
Right.
Spokane, Washington or some shit. You know what I mean? So that's doing something completely different other than what it's, being funded for. So I mean, yeah, it's a big shell game. It'd be hard to do just on the surface to do this. What's going on? So, anyways,
I agree. So Kennedy's assassinated. I believe it was Lyndon Johnson that took over for him, right? I think.
yes.
So
yes.
he was
Yes.
even more in the dark. He wasn't told much at all. Like I think he kind of had an idea we were sending 12 humans to Serpo, but other than that, he wasn't even at the greeting when they came back down. So they come down, and pick up these 12 Americans. These 12 Americans loaded tons and tons of supplies. They're supposed to last for 10 years. So they're loading food, they're loading vehicles. They even put a lawnmower on there. I don't know why, but it's in there. So they load up all this stuff. They ended up getting picked up by the aliens. The aliens also presented us gifts. One of them was a yellow book, basically, and it was 2 inches thick, and it was able to tell the entire story of the galaxy in terms of Serpo's view. Well, EBENs' view.
Essentially, galactic events that we know nothing about between other alien races, and wars, and discoveries, and
their entire history, pretty much,
and the history essentially of their view from us when we were discovered, and and what they've witnessed from their perspective. So they basically the secrets of the galaxy, if you will, from our perspective. You know what I mean? Is what this was, and it was like a holographic book too. Where he didn't hand him a novel, on fucking parchment paper, like the Bible or something like that. This was a technological device that supposedly had some type of hologram or something like that came up based on what you were trying to figure out or something like that. I don't know exactly how it worked.
Well, see, this is silly to me. So you have this extremely advanced technology piece in our, at least in our hands. We see it as extremely advanced. So what it claims, at least from Anonymous and Serpo, is it can detect when you're around, and it starts off, and it goes through basically the same story. And if you watch that for 12 hours, and then you're like, okay, I'm tired, I gotta get some sleep. You go to sleep, come back to it, it restarts. For such an advanced piece of technology, that seems extremely silly.
A big pain in the ass.
Right. Do we just not know how to work it, or is it total bullshit? Like, it's one of those two. So,
yeah. It's little things like that, though, throughout these stories. When you really dive into it and you're really looking at it, trying to analyze it from a critical eye, perspective, you find some of these things in here just doesn't make any damn sense. Like, you have these floating orbs, anti-gravity material, you know what I mean? Like chambers and shit and all this other stuff, and then you have this crazy book with the history of the universe, and it resets from the beginning like every 12 hours.
That's goofy to me. If it does exist, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's say it exists, then we don't know how to use it then, because there's no way it would reset every time. That doesn't make sense. It's too advanced. Why would it do that?
True.
And then why would you give us that book? That's man, I'm sad. I have all this information, but I have to take it all in at once. So I just gotta say it here. So yeah, we get those,
and also too one thing too before I forget, just for everybody to understand, there was 12 people, Americans, sent to Project Serpo, but there was 16 in total that were drafted and trained.
Yes. And
supposedly most of these, a couple of them, they were able to find through applications and things like that, but there was a lot of stipulations. You had to have no family, couldn't be married, no kids. You basically had to have nobody back home on the planet that was wanting you to come back. You know what I mean? That they gave a shit about you, essentially. So they were looking for people that were orphans, adopted, things like that, with those type of loner type, psychological backgrounds, in terms of their personalities and things like that. Because you're basically going into space.
Yeah, if you die, no one knows you're gone.
No one knows you're gone. So, and there's a high chance you're going to die. You're going to an alien, civilization you know nothing about.
Right.
We don't know what kind of diseases you could get, viruses and shit. You know what I'm saying? You're not necessarily going to heal over there like you would here, because through millions of years, whatever, the humans here have earned their right, to this planet and shit. So we adapt to things. We're going to end up adapting to this stupid coronavirus. So anyways, I think it's just important people to understand that there was more people. There was also, supposedly 4 people that didn't go, that were trained as well. So it wasn't just 12 people. There was a contingency plan, according to the sources that, that put this together.
So among the objects they brought, they all brought recorders, and tons of batteries, so they could basically document their series or document their films themselves. And so they go on the ship. Ship takes off. So EBEN technology, basically, it's like warp technology in a sense, but it basically
it's like
is
space distortion.
Right. It distorts time, everything. Like, so
Well,
you have point here, folded, boom.
Kind of like the Event Horizon type. If you've ever watched that movie where it talks about bending time and space, essentially,
Yeah.
like if you have a piece of paper, you have 2 points on that piece of paper. What's the fastest way from point to point, right? Well, the fastest way would be to fold it and to go to the 1 point and then just go straight through it with a pencil. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you're skipping everything from here and just going like literally like right there. You know what I mean? By folding time and space. Now, supposedly this is from our previous episode. This goes into more of what on our previous episode about Bob, where he's talking about once you can manipulate gravity itself, all these other possibilities, become available. Become a reality to you, like space distortion. So that's the things bending time and space.
So I can totally see that as a possibility. Like, that can be legit. It's just we don't have the science for it right now, at least that we know of. So when they're in this ship, though, and they're doing this, they do have a log from this time, and it feels like a lot longer than what it is for them to actually get to their destination. So they talk about it. Oh, he does. That makes him sick and all kinds of shit. So they have these little pods on the ship. It's like a little glass bowl almost. And before they go into this time rift or whatever you want to call it, the EBENs put all the humans in a little glass bowl almost, like a little plastic glass bowl. And they're basically told, stay in this pod. And the commander disobeys it eventually, goes outside of it. He said they feel really sick. They don't know what time it is. They don't know how much time's passed. It feels like 12 hours. And they have a lack of memory. So he's got a log in this, and it talks about this. And then it's like he re-wakes up, and then he almost writes an identical log, but it's not identical. I mean, it just talks about it like he didn't even know this was a thing, and then he writes it again, or talks again. Probably handheld talk. Most of these logs are, they listen to the thing and then write it back down. So he had no idea. Right. He had no idea that he even went on log before. Eventually, obviously, one of them actually gets sick and dies on the ship. I don't know if it was from... They don't really say if it was from the time stuff or...
From one of them, it says that I believe it was like a pulmonary disorder. Some kind of like a pulmonary problem. Stroke or some shit like that.
Right. Gotcha. So, yeah. So, he gets sick. They didn't know where he was for the longest of time. Like, because they're in this pod. They don't know what the hell's going on. They land... And that ends up being a confrontational issue because they took his blood and started like making clones of different things and manipulating genes and different stuff. And so the commander's really upset about this. They had like a confrontation, and
he wanted to see the body. He wanted to see the body, but then eventually they had to back down because it was starting to become, unattainable situation is what it was.
Well, the EBENs even told him, like, there's very little body left. Like, it's not here anymore. Sorry. Like, we got a little bit. Here you go.
Yeah. And then a lot of their technology and stuff is based on bio type thing. That's why they're so interested in our anatomy. How we work and DNA and splicing and all that kind of shit.
the one thing, so the book points to this as well, but you know, like the Egyptian times, you had like the pharaohs with like the dog heads and stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
You know, they had that like extended face and like it was a dog face or whatever on like the Egyptian paintings and stuff. The team actually claims to have seen that. So they said the EBENs took that dude's like DNA and they were making a clone and they were using other animal parts and all kinds of different shit, and that was one of the things they seen. It wasn't like walking around or anything, but it was in like a little cloning chamber and they could see
Well, that'd be
it.
even cooler if it was walking around.
Right, that'd be dope.
Just walking by, smoking a cigarette. What's up, guys? Oh shit!
This canine has arms like a human. Yeah, so that was one of the things. That seems kind of silly to me. So, they are unknowingly taking on radiation. So, at the same time, they did take little radiation identifiers. So they're saying, in the book at least, that they may be taking on another form that they just don't know how to measure. Because if they had their radio things and it's showing that it's highly radioactive, why wouldn't you ask the EBENs for help? Or, hey, what do you guys do about this radiation? Do you take some kind of pill? Do you inject something? What do you do? So that's one of the kind of controversial points on it. If you know you're being irradiated or radiation, taking on radiation, then why aren't you asking for help?
I just feel like this so far is just not really well thought out, and we're just going to throw 12 dudes on an alien spacecraft and go light years away. Like there's going to be like, of course, all this shit's going to. The alien that we had on our planet fucking died because he couldn't live in our environment. That probably means that we're gonna fucking die if we go to his environment. You know what I'm saying? Like, so what? So I don't know. I just it's just crazy to me that they would go so big with like 12 people. Why not just like send one dude that's just like suicidal as fuck and be like, hey, I don't give a damn, I'm going. Like, all right, man, keep in contact. Good luck. We'll see what happens. We got these other people waiting. You know, if you give the all clear, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, so, yeah, I just feel like all this is very poorly thought out. But I guess at the same time, I guess there is I could see some truth to it. Just in this one aspect, before we move on, is that we'd be so desperate to know what the fuck they know that it's just like, get on the fucking ship, like. Notepads.
Right. Well, I mean, even if
did you pack our food? No, we got you extra pencils.
Even if you take it back to like the olden times when it's like, hey, we're going to sail across this ocean. We don't know what the fuck we're going to see, but we're going to do it. Fuck it.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I mean, that's how I kind of look at it. I mean, I could see it as a possibility if that's how they're looking at it. As, hey, we're going to do this shit. We don't give a fuck about these 12 guys. Get over there and let us know what you see.
So yeah. Okay.
So,
anyways, moving on.
Another point that I'll note is it was supposedly hot as hell on this planet. Like 120 degrees constant, or 130, yes. Something like that. Yes. That is another discrepancy. There's DIA people and different people that put in the science and claim that it should be more of a constant 70 to 90. But, hey, that's another discrepancy, just something to point out. So, what I also want to talk about is even food and their water. Even when they were on the craft, they were giving the humans something to drink, which helped with their sicknesses that they were going through that time thing. They had some kind of milky water, and we found out that it actually comes from a tree that they have. So they basically milk a tree, essentially, and it gives them like this milky water that tastes like apples. So that's one thing.
Like okay.
At least that had some taste, I guess, because supposedly their food tasted like paper. And they made some kind of stew, and that tasted like paper also. So they were eating some EBEN food, but they hated it.
like eating whiteout.
Right. So they hated their food. We brought our own. We brought rations, and those.
The last 10 years lasted like 6 or 7 or something like that.
Yeah, so they had to grow and eat even food. Um, they also allowed them to hunt some kind of animal. I don't know exactly what they called it, but they ended up killing it, and then they cooked it and ate it, and it tasted like bear, supposedly. But the guys never ate bear, and he compared it to a bear. So it's another just funny point. There's a couple funny ones.
Man, this tastes like eggplant. You ever had eggplant? Nope. But this is what I'd imagine that eggplant would taste like.
I mean, I guess we say similar shit sometimes. Like, damn, this tastes like shit, and I've never eaten that.
Yeah, that's true.
But tastes like bears, kind of weird. Oh.
It's oddly specific.
Right. This tastes like bear.
Not like beef or even like bison or something like that. Man, this tastes like a black.
So they talk about a couple of their little expeditions they went on while on this planet. They seen something that looked like an armadillo, basically, and it kind of scared the crew. And one of the EBENs was with them. They called it EBE2. That was their translator. That's how they kind of talked back and forth between other EBENs. And she pulled out some kind of sound technology and basically directed it at it and scared the thing off. Now, one of the cool things about that is we actually have that technology to disperse sound to where it just basically it fucks you up really badly. I don't know if you could talk a little bit about that, if you know anything about it.
I've never had any experience personally with that. I mean, that would be, that's obviously on different frequencies and stuff like that.
Right.
With the radio waves, you could absolutely turn sound into a weapon.
Just think about it like
I think that's
what they did to the Hulk in the movie, Marvel's movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, but there's more research you can do on that and look into it. It's supposed. I mean, we have the technology. It's supposed to be something that they can use for riot control, etc.
Yeah, I could even see it more being used on like the torture side of things. You know what I mean? Like
definitely. So the reason I pointed that out was because we have that technology and we've seen that technology, and as people, in order to get different technologies, we have a tendency to just reverse engineer everything we see, which is good, and that's how we get a lot of our technologies.
Mm-hmm. We make things better.
Right.
Like Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan. Humans make things better. So they continue this voyage. They see the most deadly Serpo creature, I guess, which is a snake. And as Americans, we definitely carried guns to this planet. So we pull out our rifles, pull out our 45s.
Heat. I'm going down intergalactic.
We put rounds in this snake.
Everyone's getting a Glock, like that movie with Bill Murray, bro. Like Life Aquatica. All interns get Glocks on this trip.
Yeah, the EBENs had no problem with us taking weapons to their planet. So we shoot the hell out of this snake, and then we want to eat it because we're Americans. And the EBENs say no to that. They don't let us eat the snake. I don't know why. They just wouldn't let us eat it. So it was for the most part the end of that little voyage. And yeah. So what else did we do on Serpo?
It supposedly was 12 years before they came back, and there was only
13.
13. And what was there? 5 of them that made it back.
7.
7 made it back.
2 chose to stay. So there was another accident. They said so. Out of everyone was getting radiation sickness except for one person, one guy. He wasn't really getting sick. They were like, "Hey, he's super healthy." Well, that guy dies like next day, pretty much, and he basically had a slip and fall and dies. We try to I don't know if it was a slip and fall, some kind of accident that they boiled down to. He fell somehow or something, and we try to resuscitate him, but he's dead. We give him to the EBENs to try to resuscitate, and they do something with their technology with his heart, and they get it to pump, but all his other organs are shut down. He's dead, so he dies. They have something similar to us in terms of like measuring your heart. They just our team members said that they just kind of seen a thing, but it was flat at first, but then they fixed his heart and got it to work, but he still died. So that guy died. Um, the American people ended up running out of food, obviously, so they're eating even stuff. They chose to go north on the planet because it's much cooler. That's actually where they ran into that snake, and we set up our own little colony north of their planet, and then they helped us set it up, and then they took some EBENs up there that kind of talked to us and chilled with us. So they were just doing experiments and taking dirt samples and doing all kinds of science stuff. So we set up our little thing north. We actually lost track of time. They lost track of time in terms of Earth time. It was hard to keep track of. Their batteries and their devices that they had basically lost power. So we didn't really have a concept of time, and the EBENs concept of time was similar to what our like ancient concepts were. If you look at like Stonehenge or whatnot, we think it was some kind of time dial. So the EBENs had something similar in place, and wherever the sun shined, dictated what job the EBENs were to do. So basically, when it's here, hey, all the EBENs do this. When it's here, all the EBENs do that. So they were very fascist. Like they just had.
Well, yeah, they said it was a very police state-driven society where every being or whatever was looked at as a cog on a wheel for specific tasks, and they lived out their life doing specific tasks. And there was like festivals and you know what I mean,
Mm-hmm.
gatherings and stuff like that where people were having fun, but they were very. You got done what you had to do, or what have you. So it sounded like a very, you know what I mean, controlled society, extremely controlled. Probably very typical of what you see like in modern China or something similar to that concept.
And they did have some sports. They played a game like soccer, basically, is what our people say. And then our people taught them flag football and baseball, I think. So we taught them some stuff. There was some Barry Sanders EBENs. I guess they said there were some athletic ones, but they're all 4 foot. So
where's all the pictures and where? Because these people came back and they had a 12-page commander log.
Yep. Well, yeah, it was. Well, we ended up writing it in 12 pages, but it was really a bunch of recordings.
So these people were loaded up with all the Earth's supply of batteries to power up pictures, videos, recordings.
Yes. We did take cameras.
None of this has came out? Not one
There's
picture?
one picture.
There's one picture.
One picture.
13 years of being on
this picture.
Previously Cantina from Star Wars. You know what I mean? And you got one picture.
And a commander's log worth 12 pages. If you're trying to cover it up, I guess.
Best job ever.
Right. But the one picture basically shows the 2 suns and just some planet. It almost looks like a Mars-like planet, but it's got 2 suns. When we went north, supposedly there was more vegetation and it was a little cooler. I also want to note that the commander's log never mentioned element 115, but what it did mention was some kind of power device that even worked on our equipment. It was like a clear, it was almost like a, they referred to it as almost like plastic, and then it had like some kind of metalish kind of material, but it looked like 2 chips on like the left and the right side, and this could power everything.
Yeah.
Could power it all. You didn't have to plug in anything, it just powered it.
So it wasn't element 115?
No, they think it was some sort of antimatter, because they said there was like a little dot inside. They think it was some kind of antimatter. And it
Gotcha.
was able to determine exactly how much electricity something needed and was able to provide it. So
Well,
they powered everything with this.
I think at the end of the day, though, I'd like to dive into this a little bit more and get more specific and try to actually get some, try to find some of these pictures and go through it and stuff like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's just kind of hard to believe that there's this many people that would have had to have been involved in this from a logistical standpoint, that no one else besides one anonymous players came out on this entire thing. The for me, my judge or my barometer is kind of like, you look at like the 9/11 project bullshit, like the loose change documentary and stuff, where it's asking all these questions and then they kind of subtly fill in the blanks for you on what they believe. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Is obvious. But the problem is when you look at something like that, like a military-led operation or a government-led operation to, like, sabotage the Twin Towers themselves, you know how many people would have to be involved in that? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's just so many people, so many witnesses. And in today's day and age of people trying to make, their fortune, you know what I mean? Like, we can get into like the Greer guy and the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, but you know what I mean? There's so many people like that want the attention, that want to be on camera bragging and all this other kind of stuff, that there's no way they would do.
Well, we could take it to that a little bit. So basically, we pretty much told you Seven came back. Those guys were debriefed. They were kept in some kind of military housing ish kind of thing, and they didn't let them go. Basically, they forced them to stay while they debriefed them for pretty much the rest of their lives. The last person died, I think it was in '02 in Florida. That was the last known survivor of this mission. So
I mean, one of these people had to have left like a video or on their deathbed or something, like, you know what I mean? Like, I kept a secret all this time. Here we go. You know what I mean? Like,
my biggest problem with this whole thing is, like, Greer and even in the book, different anonymous sources say that we reverse engineered this alien technology. So we reverse engineered it to get our alien UFOs that we have today, etc. But in every single thing you read, we never understood how, or were able to recreate a functioning version of their power source. We could not recreate that little crystal piece with that little antimatter dot inside of it. We couldn't do it. So if we can't reverse engineer that, how the hell are we reverse engineering the whole craft?
Oh, 100%. Not just that, but I mean, there's no mention of Element 115. I think really that's the key to everything in Bob's story. So I tend to lean more towards Bob's side of things than I do in terms of my own personal read on the personalities involved in the people. You know what I mean? I tend to lean more towards believing Bob than I would.
I do believe Bob.
So
they do mention Element 115 towards the end of the book. They do mention it, and basically what they say is it's just a component of their propulsion system, but not a component of like the time system. It's just like going the speed of light basically is capable with this 115. It's basically, they throw a short mention in this book.
I mean, I think to wrap it up, I think that a lot of this stuff is extremely far-fetched and extremely interesting and pretty cool, but I just find it very difficult that there's only really, that there's not more people involved or something like that have came out, you know what I'm saying, that have got some type of proof here and there. I mean, I just find it extremely difficult. Like, if I think of myself and I went on this damn voyage and I came back, are you kidding me? I would have spent 13 years in space planning releasing this shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, somehow, like, there's no way the human nature is too strong, dude. There's no way out of everyone on that no one wanted to, like, really get this out there and expose it. I find it, especially, even if you were able to keep it secret, once the internet hit, man, I mean, it's going to be hard. Or some grandchild like goes up in an attic and finds this box of shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. That's
See,
my take on it. It's
for
maybe
me,
elementary, but it's just very hard.
for me, I can see there being truth, but there's a lot of lies.
Yeah,
And the main one that I'll go right back to is reverse engineering the technology.
yeah.
That's a lie. We tried. They said that we did reverse engineer the little antimatter piece, and we were able to fucking reverse engineer it, but it lasted seconds and it blew up. It was an explosion in the 2000s.
Job, I believe, too, is that's what killed the one dude's partner, Barry's partner, right?
Well, no, that was like the plasma thing, but this happened in the 2000s. They were able to reverse engineer in the 2000s, and something explosion happened. 2 people died.
All right.
So that's what I'll leave this with is, if it's real, I can see some of the history being real. I won't discredit it at all, but I don't put any faith in it.
And there's so much more too that we need to go into with the other alien species, the damn Nazi aliens, the lizard aliens. I mean, there's so much stuff. So much more stuff that came out of this that we could definitely get into a different podcast that definitely want to spend a little more time and write down, like, you know, some of the points on that stuff, because it just goes down a wormhole that's just wild. That if most likely it's not true, but if it is true, I mean, pretty wild shit. So, alrighty.
That's what we'll leave you with. Catch us next time. We'll probably talk more about Greer and some of the different technologies.
Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind.
We'll go into some of the EBENs
watch that as
well
for the next one.
Everyone, what is
it? Watch Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind.
And Unacknowledged.
Yeah, Unacknowledged. So, alrighty. Well, appreciate it. Have a good one.